Okay, then without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Vikas Budiraja, our moderator for today's session. Vikas?
Okay. So today's topic is intelligent automation, a blueprint for revenue cycle management automation. We will discuss how RCM companies are and can leverage robotic process automation to save millions of dollars by automating manual processes to streamline operations and make them more efficient. We will also discuss the key components of a successful RCM automation project. Just trying to go to the next slide. Just briefly about Infogain. We are a Silicon Valley headquartered company with software platform engineering and deep domain expertise in healthcare, travel, retail, insurance, and high technology industries. We accelerate the delivery of digital customer engagement systems to our clients using digital technologies such as cloud, microservices, robotic process automation, and artificial intelligence. Infogain delivers positive business outcomes for Fortune 500 companies and digital natives using rapid prototyping and a solid foundation of DevSecOps-based software platform engineering that ensures high quality and on-time delivery. We are a CRIS Capital portfolio company with several offices in the United States, as well as in London, Dubai, and Singapore, and delivery centers in Austin, Texas, in Poland, as well as in India. I'm pleased today to have distinguished speakers with me, Dr. Yan Chao from Automation Anywhere and Radhakrishnan R. from Infogain. Dr. Chao was the medical director for digital medicine in the translational medicine group at Amgen. He was also the chief innovation officer at Longview Technology Solutions. He was the national director of the Innovation and Advanced Technology Group at Kaiser Permanente, where he made recommendations on over 2,000 new clinical information technologies and operated a multi-million-dollar innovation grant program. Dr. Chao has founded and advised several startups, including co-founding Health Fidelity, a venture-funded NLP startup. He has 3 US patents and has been an author and invited speaker at industry conferences. Radhakrishnan R. is the head of hyper automation practice at Infogain. He is a digital transformation leader with over 22 years of experience in the industry. RK led the first ever Automation Anywhere deployment on Google Cloud. A true blue technocrat, RK has led many implementations that have resulted in over 40% reduction in process costs for our clients. So we'll start with Dr. Chao, who will provide a brief Automation 101 and also the business perspective for automating the RCM operations. And again, as Kathy mentioned, please send any questions that you may have to me directly. And towards the end of Dr. Chao and RK's presentations, we'll take those questions. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Chao.
Thank you, Vikas. Let me share my screen. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. What I'm going to discuss is a high-level overview of automation in healthcare, and then I'll focus on revenue cycle management also at a high level. Automation Anywhere is the world's most widely deployed intelligent automation platform with over 4,000 enterprise customers, 1,100 partners, and 2.4 million digital work deployed in over 90 countries. We are recognized actually as the leader in the field by all the top analysts, including Forrester Group and Gartner. And we just got another award last week from Gartner. COVID-19 is driving digital transformation due to new business requirements that are raising a series of really important questions. The first area is telehealth and telemedicine. And this is now the new normal. How do you set up remote workers quickly and accurately?
Dr. Chow, sorry to interrupt you, but your voice is not audible.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
So if
sorry
you could
about that.
go back to the previous slide, I think many of the attendees may have missed what you
Okay.
mentioned on the previous slide.
All right. Automation Anywhere is world's most widely deployed intelligent automation platform with over 4,000 enterprise customers, 1,100 global partners, and 2.4 million digital workers deployed in over 90 countries. We're recognized as a leader in the field by all the top analysts, including Forrester, Everest Group, and Gartner. We've seen an amazing 8 months. COVID-19 is driving digital transformation in healthcare on a scale that we've never seen. The first area is telework and telemedicine. This is now the new normal. How do you set up remote workers quickly and accurately? How do you give them a full arsenal of tools to do what they used to do in the office? The second area is value metrics. Even before COVID, reimbursements were increasingly value-based. This means that customers are wanting to see the outcomes and real-world benefits from the healthcare dollars that they put in. How do you trace and prove value across multiple silos and organizations? The next area is interoperability. COVID showed us that the pitfalls are severe for not being able to access and coordinate data and care from different information systems. Next area is scalability. We know that in the next couple of years, the economy is going to be very volatile. Being able to scale up and down will be critical. And a digital workforce is more easily scalable, of course, but it also frees up human beings so that on the human side of the scale, you can also scale. Next area is supply chain. This has been an issue with COVID, with ventilators, shortages of masks and ECMO machines, and shortages of isolation rooms. How do you gain visibility into your supply chain? The next area is continuity. COVID-19 has emphasized the need for agility and adaptability. And so automation has a role to reduce the exposure to fluctuating risk. Staffing shortages. I think this is a big area, a lot of shortages in healthcare. One of the reasons is the turnover and the burnout. Automation can help take away some of the mechanical things that healthcare workers have to deal with. And finally, and probably one of the most important things is the patient care experience. We're now in an era where patients have a new normal. They're getting medical care remotely. Companies are also working remotely. So the role of automation in enabling customer self-service, automating contact center, expansion, empowering follow-up and resolution of problems can be very helpful. And just a little bit more about the value side of the equation. In traditional fee-for-service, of course, it's very fragmented when the patient moves between providers. There's less incentive to focus on coordination since you're paid for service rather than results. But with value-based care, it's important in these kind of models such as pay for coordination, pay for performance, bundled or episode of care payment, or shared risk or savings programs, that you be able to track. And that is a very, very key function, that you can track value and outcomes through entire systems and between systems. And so automation can help to do that by managing data across multiple systems, by automating messaging and communications, by monitoring the best practices, and by generating KPIs and custom reports and audit trails. So when we ask about automation, one of the big questions that often comes up is, what do company employees and managers think about automation? And I think one of the interesting things is that PwC did a study, and they found that 63% of healthcare workers actually say their work requires a lot of, I would say, manual data entry. And this is, of course, not a good use of typically very expensive healthcare workers. The next finding is that the error rate for electronic paperwork is about 1 in 10 or 10% error rate, and that's rework that you need to go fix. By comparison, the error rate for picking the wrong item out of a vending machine is about 2%. Employees that were working at automated workplaces found themselves to be 31% more productive, according to industry survey. And finally, 85% of global knowledge workers are willing to reskill. And I think that's a lesson that we all should keep in mind. When you want to automate, you always have to address the issue of upskilling or reskilling. This is a Deloitte survey of over 500 executives across many industries. As some surprising findings, the RPA market is estimated to be $5 billion in 2024. Deloitte found 58% of companies had already started automating. Nearly universal adoption by 2023, which is a little bit surprising. 27% average cost savings from intelligent RPA. And finally, what is most heartwarming is that 78% of executives who did automation found that their productivity goal was met or exceeded. And that's a very important metric. So when you think about automation, how are organizations thinking about the benefits of automation? Why do they want to do automation? And I would say in the last 10 to 12 years in healthcare, these 5 areas have been areas that people have focused on. They wanted better speed, capacity, accuracy, productivity, and cost savings, and they got them by doing process automation in sort of the lowest hanging fruit areas, which be mostly back office, a lot of transaction heavy, repetitive, rules-based processes, very profitably automated. But in the last 2 or 3 years, people have started to add AI, artificial intelligence. And so we start to see healthcare expanding into different areas, such as scalability, interoperability, where a software robot or bot can reach into different systems and get data out and put data in, risk management, watching, observing for quality, safety, security, compliance, and analytics. And analytics means, of course, being able to interoperability, use that to look across systems to get data out and to build your own dashboards and to do some predictive analytics. So when you think about automation, what processes should you automate? This is just a small checklist. Actually, part of it comes from Gartner. The process should be manual, repetitive, and rules-based. It's tedious. It's boring. Makes it error-prone. The process is high volume, so you get high ROI. And the process should be stable, standardized, and well understood. Data inputs are readable. And last but not least, there should be less human intervention, and it should be measurable. Measurable means you can either get hard numbers like cost savings, or you can do things like job satisfaction. But it's important to measure it so you can get the idea of the benefit, the level of benefit. Traditional automation is known as robotic process automation, or RPA. Think of it, RPA, as a software robot that replicates the actions of an employee who performs a lot of manual processes at the computer. So RPA does that very fast, it does it very accurately, does it very well, and it lets the humans do what humans do best, which is show empathy for patients, problem solving, decision making, and creativity. But in the last few years, we've added the latest features of artificial intelligence to automation. So our intelligent RPA offering is called IQBot. And IQBot can use computer vision, natural language processing, fuzzy matching, and machine learning to give it more sophisticated capabilities. And one of the things to remember is that over time, with machine learning, actually the performance improves. So it's actually a good investment. There are 2 types of automation, unattended and attended. In unattended automation, the bot runs a series of actions automatically. That is on a 24/7 basis, and there may be some rules-based logic in there, but this is ideal for things like registration or applications that can come in any time of the day or night, can be pre-processed and automate and done so in an automated way, so it's ready for the staff to deal with. In attended automation, the example is a call center. In here, the customer agent has a
digital assistant at their side that they can call on. And so that these digital assistant can actually get data very, very fast. It can trigger rules-based actions. So for instance, if the customer needs an invoice, the bot can actually have that process automated and can trigger it immediately and do it very, very fast. There's a lot of different examples like that, but basically what it does, it allows the agent to be free to really listen to the customer and to really improve the customer experience. So it's think of it as agents getting contact center agents getting new superpowers, and it's really important today with COVID because most of these agents are now going to be at home as opposed to in a contact center physically. So we've talked about the major challenges you face. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the specific use cases. There are 6 broad categories of healthcare use cases. There are opportunities to reduce costs, increase productivity, reduce delays, improve patient experience, manage the risks, and gain insights. Automation Anywhere has worked with healthcare customers for over 10 years, 12 years. Most solutions, as I mentioned, have been in back office, typically finance and HR. And these would be the 3 columns on the left, the improving cost, productivity, and delay. And it's been beneficial for a lot of areas. As you can see, some of the example use cases: revenue cycle management, prior authorization, contact center, payment processing and posting, and so on. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The 3 columns on the right are where organizations are starting to focus. And many other potential use cases come to mind when you look at what an artificially intelligent bot can do. In the improved patient experience, bots can actually relieve patients of a lot of administrative burden by automating data collection, enhancing self-service systems, checking eligibility, and many, many other things. Under managing risks, bots have the ability to monitor all things that need to be monitored in healthcare that touch the computer. So things like quality, safety, security, compliance. A bot can record who used it, what permission was used, how long it took, what the outcome was, what decisions were made, and even generate a very highly detailed audit trail. And this was actually true at one customer where we were able to generate an audit trail within 2 hours for a regulator. That was very impressive. You can also transfer protected health data securely without involving employees, so that reduces the risk of security breaches. And of course, machine learning, some customers are very interested now to use it to enhance fraud detection. And finally, under gaining insights, automation can solve one of the biggest problems in healthcare, which is a lack of interoperability across, I would say, legacy systems. As a result, because of this lack of interoperability, it's been a challenge to do financial forecasting, coordinate care, and many, many other things. So now with automation, a bot can actually look into many different systems, do two-way data exchange, and build a dashboard with visibility across the organization, including composite KPIs and alerts and things like that. So potentially very useful. Here are some of the few healthcare case studies showing the kinds of return as possible. Companies have automated millions and millions of tasks a year, gained 20 to 40% cost savings, 30% increase in productivity, 40 to 90% reduction in manual handling time, and increased accuracy up to 100%. And of course, saving thousands upon thousands of FTE hours. And these are just a few examples, and actually they're not out of line with what analysts have found in the general industry. These are the kinds of returns you can get. Let's look at revenue cycle management to be more specific. RCM, or revenue cycle management, is used by healthcare systems to track revenue from patients in their journey from initial encounter to the final payment of balance. It's an extremely large area of work that involves the front office, middle office, back office, and there are many, many areas that can be automated, such as scheduling, point of service collection, SLAs, coding, pricing and analysis, AP, AR improvement and denials, and so on. Many, many areas. And of course, when people automate, they usually have a certain process or 2 or 3 processes in mind to start with. So that's usually how the automation is started. I've shown here 3 case studies that show what can be done, including the kinds of returns. And this is in line with what I showed before. A lot of automation can be profitable, can be beneficial right up front. These are other areas that people have done automation in. And again, as I mentioned, the revenue cycle is so broad that there are so many areas that you really have to dig into some of the details to understand where the pain points are. And sometimes it takes experience, sometimes it takes having a bot to monitor the kind of traffic you're getting through different processes to understand where the bottlenecks are. This is a typical medical billing process. Of course, this is probably different from organization to organization, but it's usually something like this. This is generic, and many providers have sort of automated parts of this, but it's usually piecemeal. As you see here, the patient pre-registers, is scheduled. They come to the clinic where the information is verified, a file is set up, and then they're informed of financial responsibility. Copay is collected, the physician visit is done, and then all this information is logged into the electronic health record, or EHR. You may need to file a prior authorization. Then a super bill is created to capture the medical charges. Codes are translated into a claim for reimbursement, and the claim is audited for compliance, a QA for compliance. Claim is then submitted either directly to Medicare or Medicaid or to a clearinghouse, and then you get into this loop of rejection and denial for about 10 to 15% of claims. And finally, as you go through and the final decision is made, you have a billing statement prepared and then subsequent actions in terms of billing. So which parts can be automated? Well, here you see the opportunities for automation that people have done, and they're highlighted in orange, which saves time, increases accuracy in claims approval, and accelerates revenue capture. But for some steps in this process, take a look at the yellow arrow. It points to a loop. So you submit a claim, and some claims will come back to you to be explained or to be negotiated, or whatever the case. These claims can be actually analyzed if you put in a machine learning system into this loop. So that, for instance, you can, and this is something that some healthcare organizations are very interested in, to analyze these claims before you submit it, to find out what are the things that might trigger an audit or trigger a rejection. And this is something that a machine learning system is very good at learning after processing either historical or ongoing claims. So this is a very, very nice benefit of AI in automation. And I've put in some generic and from generic industry experience, some of the kinds of returns you can get from this cycle, from this revenue cycle. And some of these are from our stats, some of this from an industry stats, but you can see the kinds of return and kinds of advantages you can get from automating parts of the system. But what I'd like to point out is that as you automate, as you look at your systems, your processes, and automate them, think about the process itself. You'll have to discover what the process is that you actually go through and how long it takes. But think about, how do you want to handle this end to end? Do you want to automate this particular process versus redesigning the process? I think that's a bigger question. And I think it's a strategic question for, as we cope with uncertain times, you really have to think about how to move healthcare into sort of the next generation type of healthcare. The automation journey is usually in 3 steps. We found this to be the route to success for our customers. The first step is discovery. And here is where you explore and learn about both the technology and the processes that could be automated. You pick your first 4 to 5 processes, and then you'll develop some core competencies. It's a time for learning. It's a time for exploration. It takes about 2 or 3 months. The second stage is where our customers usually build a center of excellence or enablement. As the organization looks to scale up the automation platform, you'll probably see about 10 processes being involved, and this will take about 6 months. And part of this will be the setting up the governance, the metrics, the advocacy across the organization, and critical security structures. And then the third stage is where the organization really starts to industrialize, to put in end-to-end automation, as I mentioned, over about 2 to 3 years. And this may involve many, many bots. There's usually a well-functioning center of excellence able to meet requests from a range of business groups, and perhaps a healthy citizen developer community among the business users. This is something our platform shines at. We actually have interfaces for business users as well as for IT experts. So in this situation, we actually have customers with thousands of bots getting tremendous benefits from automating things that should be automated and are better fit for machines to do. So this is something that I think holds a lot of potential, especially with the introduction of AI, but something that I hope you'll consider if you're not doing it, and certainly something we can help with if you are already doing it. So with that, let me turn it back to Vikas.
I have one question. How will automation affect healthcare workers? Do you think it will lead to the loss of jobs? That's generally one concern that people have, that automation will cause job losses.
Well, I think most people that are automating, most customers, I would say over 95% of them are actually not looking to lay off people. And actually, this is supported by a study that was published in Harvard Business Review. We showed that organizations did a lot better when they did not lay off workers, but they repurposed them for more productivity. So the organization actually got more value out of those workers. So layoffs are, as I mentioned, are always sort of the gorilla in the closet, I would say. But that's why when you automate, you really need to address that reskilling or upskilling. Automation is a powerful tool. Just like Excel, just like Microsoft Office, just like the spreadsheets and databases, when you introduce a new tool, you have to introduce new skills so you can use those tools efficiently. And so what we found is that many of these workers that are having their jobs, the part that they hate about their job being automated, they're very willing to learn how to manage those bots, how to do new things. And I think that's sort of part of the strategic planning that you have to do as an organization. But yeah, I think there's a lot of concern about that. But I think that, like with every industrial revolution, we learn new skills, we go into new opportunities. There's always been more opportunities after the revolution, and that was true for the internet too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Chow. We will have now RK present the technical side of automation in revenue cycle management, and also present the key components of an automation project. If anyone has any additional questions, please send them in the chat window directly to me, Vikas Budhiraja, and we will take them towards the end of RK's presentation. Over to you, RK.
Hey, hi, thanks, Vikas. Am I audible? Check.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. In the previous session, you heard Dr. Shah speak about Automation Anywhere products, about automation in general, and possibilities of automation in the RCM space. What I plan to cover is to provide you more from a practitioner's standpoint, and the way I've structured the content for the next 15-20 minutes is to walk you through a customer story in the RCM space, and then discuss how you can define an automation blueprint for your organization. So let's get started. Okay. So this is about our customer, who is one of the largest business process outsourcing BPO companies in the healthcare domain. They manage all the backend operations for their clients in the RCM space. And when I say RCM in general, there are a lot of operations in this space, but this customer focuses on activities that are marked out here. Some of them include scheduling, managing the registration, billing areas, which includes charge entry, payment posting, denial management, and the account receivable processes. The mode of operations was the client used to get work packets either on a daily or weekend basis, and this was to be processed within the defined SLA. The operations were mainly data entry, reading PDFs, scanned images, Excel sheets, Word documents, and sometimes even text files. They were typically mundane in nature, manual, and high volume. Now let's understand, why was the customer looking for automation as a solution? So from a business situation, there were some challenges that the customer was going through. The first and foremost was there was leakage in revenue. There were situations where the customer used to commit to take up a work with certain FTE counts, but in reality, to meet the end goal, they put in more FTEs to finish the work. And there are various reasons why that was happening. The other challenge was to meet the SLAs, they ended up working overtime. That resulted in additional costs, impacting the profit. And with overtime also came the employee morale was down, and that resulted in high training and high training costs, high attrition and high training costs. The problem statement that was posted to us was, considering the above challenges and knowing the type of operations, can you conduct an assessment to see if automation is a solution to reduce the overall operations cost? With that, we started the engagement with our customer, but before we got into the act of writing bots or even discussing RPA, we took a step back and said, let's define what the business objectives of the clients are. What is that they really want to achieve from this program? And it was agreed that the focus was essentially reducing operating expense, improving the employee morale, reducing training spend, and most importantly, improve productivity. And then we went about defining the scope. How is that we really need to take out this engagement? So first of all, is automation really the solution? And this can be answered by conducting a functional and technical feasibility followed by an ROI analysis. Does it really make economic sense to automate in a certain way? And then what we did was identified automation opportunities that met the goals, prioritized them, and provided a solution map. With the scope and business objectives defined, we put together the execution plan with the focus being get the business case approved and the infra and overall readiness for the first 2 months. In the next 2 months, target the low-hanging fruits and start creating the demand pipeline, right? And then get into full-fledged bot factory from the 5th month onwards. We also defined the life cycle, which is extremely important. How do you execute it? And in the automation world, we typically call it the robotic development life cycle, RDLC. We started off understanding what the current processes is, the as-is scenarios, what are the SOPs, gathered metrics like headcount, what is the turnaround time, what is the volume of transactions, is there any quality issue, is there any compliance issue, and so on. Once you had all these data, the next task was to conduct a feasibility and complexity assessment of all these processes, define the to-be state, and also what are the changes that are required to the existing systems. Like Dr. Chow just touched upon, there could be scenarios where the processes are great candidates from a volume perspective, but probably it's not ready for automation. So there are some tweaks that needs to be done or business process improvements that needed to be conducted. Followed by the build and test and operate. These are more from the development standpoint. Moving ahead, I'll just show you a couple of workflows out of the various processes which we identified as a part of this entire assessment. So the first one was in demographics. This is the process to manage the demographics data. As you can see, the process is straightforward, getting the information from the source data, which was an Excel sheet, log into the client application, do some validation, right, and finally post it to the client target systems. If you see, the volume was pretty high, and I'm talking about monthly volume out here. The nature of work was repetitive, rules defined, and great candidate for automation. So with an automation where we are talking about almost all tasks in a process getting automated, we could anticipate about close to 2,300 hours getting automated. This was a fairly straightforward and a simple process. Let's talk about a variety in this process, wherein we bring in some complexity. And these are again all specific to the RCM domain. This is billing process, and as a part of billing process, there's a sub-process called payment posting. This is essentially a process to manage the payment and settlement once you get the data from the insurance company. Typically, this includes reading of images or PDFs, validation of the data, and then enter data into the respective systems. This process had a mix of rule and human judgment-based tasks, right? It's extremely high volume. Again, we are talking about monthly volume, but there is a lot of human judgment out here. And since there is human judgment, you say in the post RPA section, there are some tasks which are completely automated by the bot, some which require a combination of a human and bot working together. That's what we call it as attended bots. And there are some areas where we said that validation is best for the human to do because of human judgment. And this also, if you look at it, we are talking about saving of over 7,000 hours, purely monthly savings. So with this assessment, we could put together overall saving of overall close to $1 million in a year's time. Now let me specifically move to what are the challenges and learnings that we went through as a part of this RCM engagement. And whatever is listed here is mainly related to RCM as such and BPO companies, right? So first and foremost is automating bad processes. This is business process improvement opportunities. I touched upon it. Dr. Shah also touched upon it. It's more of a strategic decision, but it's important to address this with the right stakeholder so that you know where you're getting into. That could be a short-term goal, that could be a long-term goal, but the trade-off has to be made before you decide what is right for that particular process. The second and third I've seen extensively in the RCM space, although I personally have done a lot of automation projects in various domains and verticals, be it supply chains, procurement, travel and hospitality, retail. But here, in this particular case, I see there is a lot of process variations and scenarios. And in the BPO world, especially, which is a use case in this particular scenario, if you go to a BPO floor, there are a lot of data entry operators working day in, day out. And if there are scenarios which are not documented, which in most cases is, the answer for them is they will just stand up and call for help. The project lead will come in, give the resolution and move on. So everything is human-based, nothing is documented. And when you are talking about an automated world, that's something which we really need to take care of, right? That's the variation and scenarios. The next one is breaking down the process. Like I said, the devil lies in the detail. When you're talking about ROI, right, it's extremely important to look into whether what percentage of this particular process can really be automated. Are we talking about all tasks or are we talking about specific tasks? So this is from a functional perspective. From a technology perspective, there are other challenges, like most of the applications in the RCM space required a two-factor authentication, which requires a human intervention at various times. Most of them were behind a Citrix environment, OCR, and using a legacy client application, making OCR almost difficult to read it. So if that is the scenario, your error rates could go up, and a very important factor before you say what percentage of automation can you achieve in a particular process. Excuse me. The next point out here is, again, there's a big perception out here of, especially from business community, that if you've automated a certain process, it will run end to end. As you saw in the previous process, the first process which I showed for demographics was 100% botable, but when it came to the second one, it was a combination of RPA, and human action, right? So this is something we need to manage expectations with the business users, that is a scenario where you cannot automate the entire process. Maybe only part of the process can be automated, but you still get the benefits of automation. The last biggest challenge which I've seen here, especially in the BPO field, is availability of one environment. Typically, if as the development community, if I want to get into the act of developing bots, the ideal scenario would be to have 3 environments. This would be development, staging, and prod, right? With a clean separation of concern. In the BPO scenario, what happens is you have this data entry operator connecting to the client's terminal application through remote connection or whatever is the mechanism, and working directly on the client's application. There is no training environment, there is no staging environment. This becomes an essential factor when you're writing bots, because your bot velocity will be greatly impacted. It will be definitely taken care of if you do more of preparatory work rather than jumping into the job of developing bots. So these were some of my learnings purely from the RCM space. Moving ahead, let me talk about the blueprint for automation, which is one of the topics for today. So this is a typical automation maturity model. Different from an industry standpoint, people use it in different ways. Some call it as initialize, industrialize, and institutionalize. But essentially, what we are trying to say here is which phase or which band of the phase you are in, right? So if you are just started the automation journey, you are maybe a few processes automated, your focus and goals could be different. You'd probably fall out here somewhere, wherein your focus is establish a business case, right? Show quick wins and move on to the next process, which is actually where you are building a COE, you're building a demand management framework, and also having a plan to route the redirect the efforts of the FTEs. And as you scale up, the next 2 factors are definitely the scaling how do I better do this, either in terms of cognitive capabilities and continuous innovation. So this is a typical automation continuum, as we may call it, and each of us may fit in any of these brackets or any of these bands. So no matter which phase of the maturity model you are in, as I talk to a lot of customers, these are some common questions that come from everyone. So if you're new to the engagement, it's typical question like who owns the program, where do I start, I've done a POC, what next, and so on. But if you are in the, say, 10 to 50 processes, there are some other questions like I've automated a lot of use cases, now what? I don't have anything else to do, right? Or if you're in the still advanced case, there are some more tough questions that come in. I've automated for the last 1 year, it's in production, but I really am I getting the ROI? Or some more tough questions could be, you save the front-end FTE cost, which is great, but I'm seeing that my RPA support cost is going high, right? And also, I've saved X number of hours for my organization, but what is the plan for redirecting? So these are some typical questions that every organization to whom I've spoken to come up with, no matter in what phase of the automation continuum they are in. And all these questions can be better answered if you have the right strategy, which we call it as the blueprint. And this is a sample of the blueprint that can be customized for each and every organization. But the message out here is, first and foremost, planning, right? The strategization is extremely important because we are talking about automation at an enterprise level and not working in as silos in a department. That's the first takeaway from the strategy bucket. Second is create your center of enablement, which Dr. Chow just touched upon. I'm just calling some of the key areas out here. Expectation management, right? This has to be really set with the business users. The moment they come to know that you are embarking an automation program, they will come excited, they will give you a lot of use cases, but how do you really manage them? And you have to go back to them and say that what is that you're doing with them, right? Are you really putting it in a pipeline or a backlog? When is that you're going to automate? Are they real good candidates for automation, right? Going back to the previous example, do business users expect that everything can be automated? So expectation management is one of the key out here, key things to be taken care of. COE awareness, right? And since this is an organizational initiative, it has to be top down, talking about what is that the organization is planning to do. Take a buy-in from all users because there's a talent augmentation that is also coming in, which directly points to the change management aspect. How is that you're going to manage the redirected hours of the FTEs, right? And towards the end, definitely success metrics. How do you really define success for your entire automation program? The second phase is where you get a little more detail into putting together the demand management framework. How is that your center of excellence or enablement is really going to work? How is that you're going to measure? What are the metrics and reporting? Is it going to be per process? Is it going to be at a department level? There are different strategies to really achieve this. That's the ROI measurement. And what are the various startup kits you have? And then you put together the remaining parts of the blueprint, which is creating the demand, which is getting your pipeline, and then development, support, and continuous innovation. And this is a phase wherein you really see how can you take your organization to more of a citizen development situation, right? Wherein everybody can have a bot, everybody can start developing bots. So that requires a lot of maturity, a lot of innovation comes in, various ways to establish that. But it's important to think ahead of the journey so that you know where you're going to get it. And this is probably one of my last slides, and this are some of my learnings in this journey. While I did mention that it's important for you to define the strategy and the ROI, but I see a lot of customers getting into an analysis paralysis. There has to be a start somewhere, right? There could be scenarios where ROI, it's not a hard benefit. There could be soft benefits also, but you have to make the right balance so that the momentum is not lost in this entire automation journey, right? It's good to think big, but I would recommend start small, make small successes, pick up a couple of use cases. Like in the previous example I showed you, they were straightforward use cases, but what is that you would end up saving about close to 2,000 hours monthly, which means that you're redirecting several hours of FTEs, right? Looking at the process holistically, as this is something again which does not happen, the business and IT alignment, people still tend to work in silos, right? And that has to be really avoided to really make your automation program a success. The next one is interesting out here. The moment you talk about RPA or automation, everyone thinks that maybe, okay, automation anywhere or any similar technology is the right technology for addressing the problem, which is true to a certain extent. But there could be scenarios wherein you probably don't need a sophisticated model for automation. That would be some, you can write some scripts and get it automated because you're meeting the business problem. The moment you take a approach that anything and everything that comes to me, I have to put in a RPA tool, then two things could happen. One is you will not get your ROI, a lot of processes get dropped, right? So it's really important to look at every process with a technology mindset. And the last and foremost, which is always there as a part of, this is the rule of thumb in any automation program, is never automate a broken process. Although there will always be pressure, there will be temptation to let's go ahead and do that because I see a good ROI coming in, right? So let's do that. But in the long run, this will create a lot of other problems with the business users. And that's where the expectation management comes in. With that, I come to end of my session. Happy to take questions. Over to you, Vikas.
Thank you, RK. We do have a few questions. The first question is, how would you address Citrix or multi-factor authentication related challenges when doing automation?
Sure, that's a great question. Multiple ways of doing it, frankly. One is if you're talking about an email-based access, then you could do something from a programming perspective. You can hook onto your AD and the bot sensing the mail, which comes to a predefined ID, and then once the mail comes in, take the token and go forward. That's one way of looking at it. The second is if you're talking about an SMS kind of integration, one of the options is you have to have an attended automation, right? So there is somebody who has to come in, enter the token, and move ahead. Various ways of doing it, but it purely depends on what is the situation and what's the criticality of that process.
Okay, thank you. The next question, either you or Dr. Chow, anyone can respond to this. Can you provide an update on Automation Anywhere's process discovery product?
Yes, that's a good question. It's a product that's very exciting. It came out this year. What it is there are a lot of process mining products out there, but this is a little bit different. As you know, when you look at a process, and this is the major part of the work you do when you want to automate, is you have to understand the process. You have to define it. You have to document it. You have to find out the pain points or the bottlenecks and so on. And many times when you look at processes, they're not well documented. People actually don't know what they're doing because they're doing something out of habit. They're doing something out of habit. They're doing something that they automatically do, but they don't necessarily remember what they're doing. And this is especially true of doctors, I hate to say. So a lot of things that are done are not consciously done. So the problem is when you try to document that, they may not remember what they do or all the exceptions that may happen. So we have a new tool called the Discovery tool, bot discovery tool, and what it does is it just watches what you do. So it can watch you over several iterations of what you're doing, and it monitors everything you're doing. Now, there are other process mining things that do that too, but the difference with this one is it actually generates a skeleton bot. So it goes to the next step where it creates a bot that now the IT department or the business user can start to modify and to look at the logic and to understand what's happening. And that's the exciting piece. So that tool is now available.
Thanks, Dr. Chow. One
Sure.
more question for you. Have you worked any of the projects where the automation was done with an Epic client? Because Epic at times, as you know, it's a challenge working with Epic and doing the automation.
Right. And Epic is, I came from Kaiser. Kaiser is the poster child for Epic. And we had one of the largest Citrix farms in the country just to do Epic. And we had 22 instances of Epic. But Epic has been a challenge for sure because it's, I guess the closest analogy is it's like Apple. You know, everything is in its own ecosystem, and it's the contract that's actually quite restrictive. So we have worked with a number of customers on Epic. The issue is not a technical challenge. Epic is actually easy for us to automate. The issue is usually a policy problem. That is, I remember one instance last year, we talked with a very large system in the East Coast to automate the delivery of alerts and reminders into Epic. And we did the research. It was possible to do, quite easy to do. The issue came when they went through compliance. And people got really nervous about having a bot writing into the problem list in Epic. It's a policy issue, and it's an understandable. So we had to find another way to get the alerts to the physicians, and it was possible to do that, you know, using a less risky approach and so on. But I think the issue is, what is the organization willing to do as far as their Epic contract? Epic, for instance, says you cannot share a screenshot of your Epic screen with anywhere on the internet, and that's why it's so hard to find those screenshots. But we can certainly work with customers, and I remember another customer was kind of skeptical about what we could do with Epic. We actually spent some time with them on a proof of concept, and we're able to automate an Epic bot within 15 minutes. I mean, it's easy, but the issue is that what you want to do? Is that what you're comfortable doing? So yeah, that's sort of where it is these days. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Next question for you, RK, if you can answer this one. What kind of hand-holding is required in terms of training and enablement for the deployment of RPA solutions?
Right. That's actually a good question, especially when you're talking about deployment of RPA solutions. So the way I would look at it is, it's always advisable to partner with experts who can guide you on what's the right deployment strategy, right? How do you manage the release? Whether your deployment should be on the cloud or on-prem, what's the right way to do it for you? What's the strategy to optimize, to monitor and optimize bots? So the best way to do it is definitely take the help of experts, either your IT, and this is true especially if the business is driving it. It's always better to take IT help or experts help here. And over a period of time, this is something which can be easily monitored, especially with Automation Anywhere giving a lot of tools like bot insights. Things become pretty easy to handle it, and then the business users can take care of. But the initial hand-holding will be required for the business users.
Okay, great. Next question is related to integration and any RCM process. You know, you have to integrate with other systems. So the question is, can the bots integrate with practice management systems, which typically would be at the provider locations, to facilitate the whole RCM process?
Yes, it's possible. In fact, this week I was speaking with a mental health provider that has several hundred practices. And you can imagine the challenge it is when a lot of these folks have different systems, different practice management systems. But it can be integrated. It's just, it's going to take a bit of work, you know, to do that. But it is certainly technically possible. Anything that a user can touch, automation can handle. And in fact, can go beyond that, because if these systems have APIs, or direct connections through to their database, we can have a much more reliable connection. But given that even with just a user interface, some of these systems are very old, they don't have APIs. Even with just a user interface, we have ability to look underneath the screen and look at the objects underneath the screen. So it's quite robust in most situations. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, maybe two more questions. RK, what are the key factors for successful deployment of RPA at an organizational level?
Okay. So as it comes to my mind, the first is definitely, like I was saying, the strategy, which is a part of the blueprint. The alignment of business and IT would come second for me, setting up realistic expectations. And most importantly, how do you institutionalize an effective change management process, right? And all these in a great way get addressed if you have a center of enablement set up.
Okay. And since we are in the COVID world, I'll conclude with this last question to Dr. Chow. How do you think COVID-19 will impact healthcare organizations in the long term, and if RPA has any role to play there?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's been a challenge, of course, for everybody. The first 3-4 months, we, like everybody else, was trying to figure out what was going on with COVID, what was happening. And of course, one of the first things that happened was the involuntary proof of concept to do telemedicine for everybody. And telemedicine was one, supply chain was another, a lot of issues with onboarding and offboarding and so on. But I think now that that piece is over, and now everybody's looking to digital transformation and what is the new normal. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I would say a lot of volatility in what people are planning for, both on the payer and provider side. So I think the goal for the next couple of years will be agility, scalability, the ability to bring people on very quickly, the ability to do telemedicine and handle data, remote data from sensors, things like that. A lot of issues. And I think, and there'll be new risk adjustment models for payers and so on, new payment models for telemedicine, for all kinds of things. So I think for the future, the key is to take this as an opportunity, to really think about your business end to end, and to think about, if we're really serious about sort of moving healthcare from the 19th century to the 21st century, what is healthcare going to look like? Look at all the other industries that moved into the 21st century: banking, consumer, retail, everything else. Is healthcare going to look the way it looked, 8 months ago, or should we do something different? I think the winners would be the companies that can actually do that. I was just talking with a mental health company actually this morning, and mental health is a poster child for telework. It's perfect. But there are many other specialties, dermatology, a lot of things, radiology, things that you have to kind of rethink. And I think that's where the opportunity is, and it's very exciting.
Thank you. So thanks, Dr. Chow and RK, for your presentations. I would also like to thank all the attendees for joining us for this webinar. We will be sending a link for the recording to all of you shortly after this. And if you have any additional questions or would like to discuss your automation project with our team, please feel free to contact us, and we would be happy to assist you in planning and working on your automation project. So with that, once again, we'd like to thank everyone and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas.
Thank you, Vikas.
Ciao. Thank you, RK.
Welcome.